Hello and welcome to Nourish Body, Mind, and Spirit. Today I am interviewing Cara Graver. Cara and I met years ago at a craft fair at my daughter's school, and she just makes these most beautiful little, clay objects. I believe they're clay. And, she's an incredible artist. And then a few months ago, we bumped into each other at a local Weston A. Price Foundation meeting, and I found out that nonviolent communications was something that was, something that you're an expert in or something you're passionate about, as well as being a holistic health coach. And I knew I had to interview you once I found that out. So thank you for joining me today.
So much for your interest and thank you for asking. And I really applaud you for doing podcasts. That's a whole leap to get over. So
I enjoy it. And what I love about podcasts is you can reach more than one person at a time. You can reach a whole group of people. And I was wondering, I know you had several things that you're very passionate about, and the holistic health coaching. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your work.
okay, you mean the coaching and the NBC and how they go together?
Yes,
Okay.
that would be great.
Okay. So I'll just be brief about the background. I got my training at IIN, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, because in 2005, because I was really passionate about food and health. And one of the wonderful things that we did there was we connected primary and secondary nutrition. Primary being how you live your life, your career, your relationships, your spiritual practice, creativity, exercise, all of that is your primary food. And food, which we think is so important, and it is actually secondary nutrition. But if you're if things in your primary food area over here are not so nourishing, then what you're picking for food over here is possibly compromised. Maybe you're eating to fill a hole, or you're mindless eating or whatever. But the primary food, if this part of your life is not working, then you've got the problem over here. But if this part of your life, if the secondary isn't working, then it affects the primary. So that was really an amazing picture to me. So the class I was in was 1,200 people in a large auditorium in 2005. And I noticed how wonderful it was that everybody was taking this in their own direction, this training. So one of the things that morphed for me was that I realized I was hardly ever talking to people about food. It was their primary food that was the problem. So nonviolent communication just fits in so well there, because it helps. The basis of nonviolent communication is all about recognizing our needs. So can I give a little background on nonviolent communication?
Please. Yes, please.
So it was started by a man named Marshall Rosenberg, and he was doing this in the late 60s, early 70s. And it came out of experiences he had as a child. When he was 9 years old, his family moved to Detroit, and that was a time when there were race riots in Detroit. And his family had to stay indoors for a week, and when they came out, people were dead. And his question as a 9-year-old child was, how can somebody hate you for the color of your skin? And then when he went to school, the roll was called, and the teacher said, Marshall Rosenberg. He said, here. And the kid in front of him turned around and said, are you a kike? He didn't even know what that meant. But he figured it out, because that kid was always trying to beat him up, waiting after school to beat him up. He thought, how can somebody hate you for your name? And he had another experience, which was quite different. His uncle, I think, was some kind of a physical therapist, possibly. And he came to the house regularly in the evenings to work with Marshall's grandmother, who lived with the family. And he saw that that wasn't the kind of work that he, Marshall, would want to do, but he saw that his uncle really had such care and relished the time with his grandmother. And the question that came to him at that moment was, where did we lose our compassion? So he saw that thing that his uncle was doing with his grandmother as our natural state of compassion. So he set about, went through his life, got his PhD in psychology, and on his way out of his schooling, one of his professors said, well, Marshall, we really don't know any more than we did when you came in here about where did we lose our compassion. So he set about to change that himself. And he came up with a protocol, we call it protocol, but he came up with a plan that recognized that we all share the same needs. There are universal human needs, and it's not just those ones for food and shelter. It's things like, I give my clients these lists. It's things like, this many needs. And so we're all at all times just trying to get our needs met. And the tricky thing is we don't really know, we haven't focused on what our needs are. We are just reacting out of a training that we've all been through for centuries, which is to communicate through blame, demand, and manipulation.
Yes.
We can recognize those things in our lives, how it's happened to us and how we've done it, because it's really just the way we've been trained. So if we can recognize what our feelings are, because that's the first step, then the feelings, as uncomfortable as they may be, let us know that we have some unmet need. So the reason I give lists to my clients is we're just not very familiar with our feelings nor our needs. So I'll tell you a story about, I don't know whether this fits in here or not, but this is a picture of how those things work. Marshall's mother was in a workshop with him at one point, and they were talking about how to get our needs met, and she left the room. And as she came back a little while later, he said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I realized I never was able to ask your father for anything." And he said, "Well, tell me about that." And so what happened was she grew up in a family, I think there were 4 girls in the family. They didn't have much money. She was the youngest, and she was lively and energetic and interested in things, and very upbeat child, but a little too much for some of her older sisters who had been trained, you don't ask for anything because we don't have any money. So at one point, one of her sisters had appendicitis, and she had to have an emergency appendectomy. And when she was in the hospital, a friend or neighbor, somebody, made a little beaded purse and gave it to her sister. Well, you can imagine, Marshall's mother coveted that purse. She thought that was the best thing, wished she had one herself, to the extent that she feigned a pain in her belly, and long story short, went to have her appendix out. I mean, this is the lengths that we go to get our needs met. And she's in the hospital. It gets worse. She's in the hospital recovering, and a nurse is taking her temperature. But before the nurse came to take her temperature, that neighbor came and brought her a little beaded purse as well. So she scored. However, the nurse came in to take her temperature, stuck a thermometer in her mouth, and Marshall's mother was saying, "Look what I have," holding it out. And the nurse said, "For me? Thank you," and disappeared.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
story that really got involved with where things go. So, yeah, so when I work with people, I really believe that the fact of identifying our feelings so that we can identify our needs, it's very simple, but it's based on something that we're not really skilled at. The first thing that we have to do is make an observation, but mostly we get tied up in stories.
Yeah.
When somebody pulls out in front of us in a car, the story is, "He almost killed me." But the story, if you think about it from the feelings and needs perspective, then what has happened is, I was really scared because he pulled out in front of me and something could have happened. I see that it didn't now, but I had a need for safety. So that's a whole different thing.
Yeah. So when I had seen you at this meeting a few months ago, I've been feeling very distraught about the public discourse that's been going on. And when I think about it, I think because I think I saw the real shift around the 2016 election. I felt like the divisiveness going on in the political landscape was more than I had ever remembered in my entire life. And I'm 64, so I've been around for a long time. I don't remember there ever being a time where, like, the leaders of the parties were ostracizing, or not ostracizing, that's not the right word, but you know making terrible comments about the people in the other party, right? So in the past it would always be like, you know the Republicans and Democrat leaders maybe hurling things at each other, but they never attacked the people. And that was like a huge thing for me to observe. And then I saw things change also in social media. Now, I'm Jewish, so I have experienced anti-Semitism my entire life. And I'm always appalled by it because I don't feel like, when people get to know me, they realize I'm just a person like they are, right? And just because I was raised Jewish doesn't mean or born Jewish, doesn't mean I'm a bad person. But it's almost like this whole issue of, I really believe the divisiveness is around not understanding other people's viewpoint and not taking the time, right? It's just people get labeled. Now we see this in the COVID area, you're either pro-vaccine or anti, and it doesn't matter which side you're on. It's like, this lack of communication, not being compassionate towards how people feel that have a different opinion. And my personal belief, even when it comes to politics, is that I was very strong in my political beliefs until 2016. And all of a sudden I started talking to people that were, registered opposite to me. And we just started having conversations. And the thing that I learned was that we actually are more alike than we're different. We all want, our children to be safe. We want to be able to put food on the table, those basic needs, right, of survival. But, from my viewpoint, and I hope this doesn't mess up our interview, but I feel like we're being manipulated, by the media and by the politicians, rather than coming together as communities and say, hey, what do we have that we care about? What are similarities? And how can we form stronger communities? And let's not really worry about what's going on in Washington.
I think you have hit the nail on the head, but that sounds a little bit
Too violent.
But yes, I heard you say a lot of things, and it was very interesting. And what you came around to after noticing some things that were happening was that we needed to come together. And that was great, because that was you inside responding and trying to understand what was going on. Now, if we take it back to the initial thing that happens for people, even with regard to political things, if we talk about Republicans or Democrats, we've already lost our connection to a human being, because what on earth does that mean in the first place? So we can't actually classify people in that way. So that's one of the helpful things about nonviolent communication. When we start out, it's the observation that we're making. For instance, didn't think that was going to happen. Sorry.
No problem.
How do we make an observation? You made the observation that people were being attacked. Okay, so what is it that you heard? I mean, we'd have to go back to, if you could, what is it that you heard that gave you what feeling? Because people being attacked is actually not, it doesn't get to what you're feeling it. So what is it that, if you can remember, because it's really helpful to.
I can remember it as if it were yesterday. So first of all, I will tell you, up until that time, I had been a lifelong progressive Democrat. I always voted Democrat. Occasionally I would vote for Republican. And for me, I just was getting discouraged, promises being made, they weren't being, followed through. And so I was starting to question things anyway. And when Hillary called Republicans deplorables, I tell you, I felt sick to my stomach. And I will, just in all honesty, I did not care for her as a candidate. I was a Bernie person. I just felt like he was coming more of a place true, to his heart. And I just didn't trust her. But when she said that, I knew in that moment I could never vote for somebody who would, make a comment about like half of America. Like, how are you ever going to be a leader to the entire country if you put everybody in that basket? And that was the turning point. And I will tell you, I am an independent now. Because I just feel like there's a problem from both sides. I feel that they're both captured by, special interest groups, and I feel like that's what's driving their decisions. But in that and as I said, I knew I wasn't going to vote for her anyway. And I think I wound up voting for like the Green Party candidate. Yeah, it was a Green Party candidate, but that was it.
It was an amazing turning point in history, really, to have somebody make a statement like that. And what we're focusing on here is you heard that statement, and when you heard that statement, you felt sick to your stomach. What other feelings can you imagine? Can you remember what other feelings that you had?
Well, I just felt disgust. I felt disgust towards her. I had like, to me, like, as I said, I was already feeling like she wasn't a good candidate. I already felt like The system was being manipulated to put her in that position. So I felt betrayed. And, and even though I had identified as a progressive Democrat, and I do feel like it was part of who I was, I've always, there was this saying when I graduated high school, under your picture, you had a chance to put a quote, and I put something like, people are better when they build bridges instead of walls. So even people that I had nothing in common with on the surface, people from other countries and other ethnicities and religious backgrounds, I've always been a curious person. So I've always extended that bridge to people to try to learn more about who they are, because I want there to be peace in the world,
Came in with that mission.
Yeah.
With that mission, which is what allowed you to see that situation when you heard what you heard, to feel disgusted and betrayed. And I just want to tell you something about the word betrayed. So if we're working with nonviolent communication, we're actually clearing off all the labels: Democrat, Republican, Progressive, Green Party, whatever. We're clearing away the labels because that doesn't describe anybody. That's been fed to us for the purpose of manipulation. And that's not an NBC thing to say, but we notice that things are going on. So betrayed is actually not a feeling, it's a thought. And betrayed starts us on a path of a story. So the more we tend to build a story, the further we get from being able to know what our actual need is and to know how to meet our needs. So disgusted, sick to your stomach. What's another word for betrayed? What's the feeling word that describes that betrayal? Was there a little fear there, or?
Yeah, the fear was that she was going to become president and, had already created this huge division in this entire country.
So the fear was there as well, and there was the noticing of division. So what do you suppose your need was?
To feel safe.
Your need was for safety. Yes. And we all, since we are all at all times just trying to get our needs met, the needs are never in conflict, but the strategies for getting them met are where the conflict happens. Because, gosh, many people are wanting safety. People who actually were on the other side want safety. So it's how we get that need met. So anyway, your need for safety took you in a direction to do what?
I mean, I didn't really do anything. Like I didn't.
Because you changed your thinking. You said, you didn't change your thinking. You directed your attention away from the person who was not going to meet your need for safety and looked for safety somewhere else.
Right.
That is beautiful. So that was you being in charge, and we are in charge. But sometimes we use strategies that are costly. So a costly strategy, I'm not good at thinking about these things. It usually comes from somebody else. But a costly strategy, well, the simple thought of an alcoholic, the costly strategy is to take another drink. So there's costly and there's effective. And we're always just faced with those two options. So if we can, I really feel like life has gotten so complicated, especially with the words that mean different things now. Like, for instance, many people who have been lifelong Democrats, I really shouldn't say this because it's not a nonviolent communication thing to say, except that the Democratic Party is no longer what it was when good-hearted people took their good-hearted interests and invested them in people who were going to promote them. So that's, you know, we're confused now because what's that about? But so anyway, the first thing we do is make that observation. Like what I heard you say, an observation is either what I heard or what I saw. And it has no story with it. So what I heard her say was the deplorables. And immediately I felt upset in my stomach. I had a bodily sensation about this. And there was a thought of betrayal. I was scared. This was not something I recognized as going in the right direction. So you figured out how to go in a different direction yourself. I have a twice a month NVC group on the second and third Thursdays of the month. And the last one was on the 19th, last Thursday, I guess it was. And one of the situations that we talked about was such a great picture of how useful this is. A woman was telling me about her sister who had given her a gift of some dish towels. And the speaker said she didn't know my colors. What she was expressing was her need was to be seen, that her sister didn't see her or know her. So what can you do with that? Someone's given you a gift and it's not the gift that you want. So you could say something about it, but that's a little scary. Like, how do I tell somebody I don't like something? So what it came around to was she could also notice that she really was so happy to see her sister want to give, because her sister has not been a giving person. So when she realized that she loved that that her sister was giving, we worked out something about how she maybe could say to her sister, I love seeing how you really loved giving this to me. But would you be willing to ask me next time what it is that I might want? So the words, would you be willing, are showing that it's not a demand. It's not like, geez, why don't you ever figure out what I really want? So she was so thrilled that we could come to that picture, because that really spoke her heart. I love seeing you and how you wanted to give to me. But next time, would you be willing to ask me? Because the other part of it was, I have so many things in my house that I'm actually really trying to cull things. So if you could ask me what I would enjoy or what I would need, that would be great. So it gives both parties a place in the discussion where they're able to meet, where a bridge can be built. So then it went to her sister's husband, and there was a lot of talk about how, and I hear this a lot lately, that the term narcissist is being thrown around a lot. And as you can imagine, that's not an observation. That's a diagnosis or an evaluation. So what we came to, she said, she was telling me that he's a narcissist, and she was telling me that there is a word for that is a person's name. I can't remember what it was. And that it means you pretend to be smart. You're really stupid, but you pretend to be smart. So this is how she was describing him, which is, again, not an observation. It's a judgment and an evaluation. So what we came to with that is, what do you think what need was he trying to meet by acting like that? Because that was him trying to meet a need. And she realized that his need was to feel like people thought he was smart. So he needed to feel acceptable. And what we got to after that was, if we can hold that person in our minds or hearts or both in that place of, he was just trying to meet a need and he needs to feel acceptable. It's a whole different thing than blaming him for being a narcissist. There's a bridge that's been built there. So wonderful things like that can happen out of this simple.
Yeah, and what really, of course, comes to mind now is just conversations around COVID and being vaccinated or not vaccinated, and just seeing, families being torn apart and friendships. Like even at my daughter's school, there was a very strong push on a certain direction and on the kids, like bypassing what the parents wanted. They wanted to control what the kids were doing. And, I tried really hard because it wasn't the direction I wanted, right? This decision is a medical decision. It should not be coerced into by the teachers or the administration, or other parents. This is a personal medical decision, and it's important to respect that decision, just like I respect your decision to make your decision for your family, right? And, I never was hurt. I mean, it was a very frustrating experience. Fortunately, my daughter graduated, but for a year and a half, she was just constantly, being pressured. And the funny thing is the school had a thing about, don't pressure your fellow students to drink or take drugs. So it was, a hypocrisy that was happening, let alone going against the basic tenets of the school, of the system. And I'm not naming names intentionally because I don't want to do that. But instead of being open to conversations and just saying, hey, like, let's express our feelings without judgment. And, I want you to hear me for why I feel the way that this conversation should not be happening in the school. And tell me why you feel it should. I felt like it was a safe, they felt their personal safety would be effective, but as it turns out, I was right. So,
everybody was out for their own personal safety, no matter what you believe. Right?
Exactly.
So here's another really great thing about nonviolent communication. If we clear away all of the evaluations and the judgments and even the names of groups and things like that, and we go inside and we say, my need for safety, my need for shared reality, my need to know and be known, many of these things are not being met for me here. So I may not be asking too much, but I may be asking the wrong people. I think this whole situation that has unfolded over the past 3 years has been a wake-up call for us all to say, why do I do the things I do? Why am I interested in the things I'm interested in? What really matters to me? And knowing that the federal government has no right to make the decrees that they have made. Okay, this is an understanding that's out there among some people, but among others, it's we need to be taken care of. So we're all kind of on our own now to say what direction do I need to go? And you were talking about communities helping each other. That's how it's happening. People are finding themselves, finding their way to the places where people are really wanting to work in the same way.
So and I'm going to ask you to go out on a limb here. I realize that you're used to working with individuals directly or groups, but I was hoping that maybe you could share a tool that anybody who's listening that wants to try to repair something with their family or their community. Could you give it like a few steps, like how to communicate in a way that, people will be receptive to having that conversation? Again, I realize having you there would be better, the best, but if there's anything that you could, like some guidelines, that would be very helpful.
But also, not only maybe me being there, but hearing from the person what their experience is, because it really all goes down to something so simple. I mean, in a world where we want to do something, we want to make a change, we want things to be better. I think the simplest thing we can do is to get to know, get to have our personal shift from the way we used to communicate to the way we do now, or to the way we want to. So and I've got, I always hand people out the basics, which is to start with the observation. When I see you do this, or when I hear you say that, I feel, and then you get to figure out what it is that you feel. And then that feeling takes you to what's the unmet need that triggered that feeling. So for instance, the unmet need for you in the Hillary situation was a need for safety. The feeling was fear. I mean, you had lots of feelings, but you had a need for safety and lots of other needs as well. So you get to figure out, how will I get those needs met? Remembering that you may not be asking too much, but you may be asking the wrong person. So in my family, I have a daughter and grandchildren, daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren who live in Philadelphia. And when the vaccine stuff first started happening, I would send things to my daughter about, this mRNA. I think, I think this is not a good idea. It was clear that she wanted to hear nothing about it. That was so hard, because I thought, I need to let her know this, because this is important. Because what? Because I'm right? Oh, it comes down to that, doesn't it? Because I'm right. That's where it gets tied up. Don't tell me what you think I should do. I'm not saying she said that, but that's what we do in an argument like this. So I had to back off and know that they were all getting vaccinated. And I had to go with faith. I had to go with, I have no idea how this is going to work out. But I believe in the possibility of things going in the right direction, even when they start going in the wrong direction. So I had to have that with me, so that I didn't hold them in the place in my mind where we were estranged from each other. And I did do that in the beginning. I thought, why are we not allowed to go to their house? Just because their school says that they have to be in a pod. Why can't we be in their pod? That kind of stuff. And then I realized, so what's going on with them? They are scared. Every action that they did was because they were scared, and they were trying to do what would keep them safe. They had a need for safety. I had a need for safety. I wanted them to know that the vaccine wasn't something that they should do from my world. So the first things first, we make the observation, get connected with ourselves about the situation. What is it that I am seeing or hearing, and how does it make me feel? And usually you just do this to yourself. You don't have to say it to them, because we're trying to work something out in ourselves. So if I can know that I'm scared, freaked out even, whatever, then I can know, okay, what is my need? What's my unmet need? My need is for safety. I don't see any place I can get safety. So, okay, work on it. How can you get safety? It might be sort of revamping not revamping, but getting really clear on your belief system. What do you think? Do you think there's anything at work behind the scenes in a good way? We know, we're pretty sure there's something behind the scenes in a bad way. But so what is our belief system, and what is the most important thing? So in the situation with my daughter and her family, the most important thing was to stay connected. So what I really basically had to do was just make a statement, they've all been vaccinated, period. I could go to the place of they've all been vaccinated and they're probably going to die. I don't know that. So the 4 questions is also very helpful here. I don't know, you familiar with them from Byron Katie?
No.
Okay, so the 4 questions, like if I was to say, they've all gotten vaccinated and they're all going to die. The first 2 questions are only a yes or no answer. So the first question is that true that they're all going to die? I could even say, yes, it is, because this is what I believe. Second question is, can you be sure that's true? That puts a different spin on it. I can't be sure it's true. Third question, how does it make you feel thinking it's true? Where in your body do you feel something when you think it's true? Oh, I feel this terrible thing in my stomach and my heart. How would you feel if you didn't think it was true? Oh, I would feel relief. So nothing happened in this little moment when we did this, but my thinking took my body to different sensations. I was having physical responses to my thinking. So I better be careful about what I'm thinking. So another phrase that Byron Katie that's so wonderful from her is, all suffering is a result of believing what you're thinking.
Right.
So if we can get ourselves out of that place where blame, demand, and manipulation were the ways to get our needs met, even though we had no idea what our needs were, and just go to, what is my need? How do I feel? The feelings will tell me what I need, and the lists are helpful because we don't really know how we're feeling sometimes, and we don't really know what those needs are. And we often fall into that, when you mentioned betrayed, many ED words imply that someone has done something to us to make this situation happen. So betrayed, I can't even think of another one right now, but there's a whole list of words that imply that someone has done something to us and that is why we feel the way we do. No. The reason we feel the way we do is because of our thinking. So let's clear up our thinking. Is this true? Can I be sure it's true? And go down that path and realize I'm the one who's making my body feel this by how I'm thinking. So we might want to do something larger then figure out how to get our own personal needs met. But I don't think it can happen until we understand our own process, so that we can go to that place where we've got a brother-in-law who we formerly regarded as, what's that word? A narcissistic personality. And so that's where we get to do an empathy guess. So what's going on with him that makes him do that? Meaning, what strategy is he using to get his need met? And we can hold him in that place of, yeah, I hear that he's struggling with that. I'm struggling with my things. He's struggling with that. That's how compassion and bridges can be made. One of the other steps in nonviolent communication is the request. And the request, when you've said what it is that you feel and then what you need, you get to make the request, like the woman who was saying, would you be willing to ask me what I need, or to, instead of these towels. So that's a request, and the other person gets to say no. That's what a request is. We don't do that when we're demanding. We try to figure out how to say it so that she can't weasel out of it.
So I really love that, because, number one, you're speaking up, right? Rather than, because resentment builds if you don't, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But also you're asking in a way that it's not like you're telling them, you're asking them. And that also gives them the power to say no if they don't want. And I think, you're talking about, your kids in Philly, and, I had a similar situation where everybody in my family was going to get it, my nieces, my sisters, and I didn't want to sound like I was preaching. They all knew that I've been working with vaccine injured people for 25 years, 30 years. They knew it, and I could tell that they were probably going to get it, right? So what I did was I started out an email with, I'm sending this to you because I love and care about you. And I'm concerned that maybe you're not looking at all the pieces of the equation to make the best decision. You're only hearing one side. And, I put together like facts from the CDC, who was at most at risk, like all that stuff. And, I didn't even get a response. Like, I feel like at least if they acknowledged and said, oh, we appreciate that you care and you're concerned, but, we've already made our decision or whatever, at least I would have felt heard, right? Instead of, what's that?
Needs to be heard.
Yeah.
Okay. So how would you, and what was the feeling that came before the knowing the need to be heard?
Oh, my heart was broken. I mean, I felt like to not be seen, right? I didn't feel valued as a person. Like I felt.
That's not a feeling.
Okay.
That's a story. I didn't feel valued as a person. That's treating them with a story. So you felt hurt. I'm also guessing curious as to why they didn't respond.
Yeah, it just was so strange. Like I spent over an hour working on this email. I culled all this information. I put my heart and soul into it, and I told them I love them, and boom, nothing. It's like, okay, do I not exist as a person?
Story that you built, so you really got more and more invested in this thing, which you assumed they would really be grateful to receive.
Exactly.
Why wouldn't they be grateful to receive?
Exactly.
Well, that's what I thought. How about that?
What's that? Oh,
Because they weren't grateful to receive it. What do you think was going on with them when they received that?
in my opinion, they just believed the person who was talking from the TV.
Okay.
And I'm just a chiropractor. What do I know?
All right. So what you think was going on with them was that they were, well, the strategy for them to meet their need for safety, because this was what it was about for everybody. It was a need for safety. So the strategy for them to meet their need for safety was to follow someone else's guidelines. That was scary for you because you know so much. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then we go into the part about how, look at how much time I spent. That has nothing to do with anything. You spent that time because that was your strategy for meeting your need to educate them.
Right.
And you weren't asking too much, but you were asking the wrong people. That's all that was. Takes the sting out of it. I was just asking the wrong people, even though it doesn't take the sting out of it because they were your family.
No, it doesn't. I hate to say it doesn't, but
We have to get to that place where we're seeing the other person as responsible for their own decisions, no matter what.
right. And the truth is at some point I did let go. And I'm like, obviously it's their decision, but it still didn't mean that every time I'd see them, I didn't have this, kink in my stomach worrying because, we still don't fully know what the long-term potential problems are. And, it terrifies me that, of what could happen, the harm that could happen. But I also accept that it was their decision, even though I don't feel good about it, but it was.
So it worried you and you were terrified.
Yeah.
It took a while for you to let that actually, that fact that they have done what they're doing and you have no way of influencing the situation. So that sort of subsided a little bit. And you mentioned, we don't know what the long-term effects are in either direction. So the more we see the things that tell us what terrible things are happening. Do you know about the site called How Bad Is My Batch?
Yes.
I went on that site on behalf of a friend who was scared. She was talked into it by her family. I mean, they were relentless, and so she didn't want to go on the site because, of course, that would face her with something that would what are we making it mean? Right? That's always at the bottom of things. What are we making this mean? How much do we actually know? Is that true? Can you be sure it's true? Anyway, I looked up her batch for her, and it didn't have anything big at all on it. There were others that did have some statements of harm, but yeah. So anyway, we're at the end of the day, we're trying to, as we started this thing out, we're just trying to get our needs met. And the strategies we use are either costly or effective. And sometimes holding the other, who you can no longer communicate with on a certain topic because you're at different sides of it, holding them in your heart as being here for a different experience. The thing that levels me from time to time is all levels of consciousness are here at the same time. Doesn't mean one's better than another, and everybody's here for a different experience. So people have to be able to make their choices. And, many people do not follow the thing that we think is common sense. or even scientific sense. And somebody in that universe over there could be saying the very same thing about us. So our only responsibility is to be clear about what our needs are and how to get them met. And if we can't get them met in the direction we're going, how will we get them met? And that's why it's so wonderful that these are general needs: the need for safety, the need to be known. You have many people in your life who know you, right?
Yeah.
You feel known by many people. So that's where you direct your attention. And it is a parting of the ways, but it's not the same parting of the ways that we have to surround with the stories of terrible things. We don't know what will happen. I mean, I'm concerned about things like AI and how the human being is maybe going to be co-opted. There are people who come here to do that.
Right. And, unfortunately, once you go down that rabbit hole, I mean, spraying in the skies and what they put in our water, and now the food system, losing its integrity, so many things.
How do we get our needs met? We go to a Weston Price meeting. We surround ourselves with people who are kind of on the same page, but people aren't going to be always on the same page about everything. But it's a great impulse that's coming to us to be find our local farmer, find the kind of food that has, as far as we can't take the spray out of the sky, but also we've kind of accustomed ourselves, we've evolved as humans, we've accustomed ourselves to many things, and our bodies have kind of changed to be able to work in any way with some of those things. I don't know how to say this, but there are things that we are getting used to over time. We're adapting to. We're evolving spiritually, physically, mentally. We've got all of those things that are evolving, changing.
Yeah. So we're kind of running out of time, and I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but maybe we'll do another one of these sometime soon. I was wondering, two things I want to leave people with is, one is how they can reach you if they're interested in working with you.
Okay, so I meet people in, I do these public kind of NVC groups, and I have a mailing list. I can send, if people want to be on the mailing list to find out when they are, I can send that to them. But I also do individual one-on-one sessions, and that's really my coaching work at this point, is I'm coaching people through nonviolent communication, because it is the way to find out what you want and to find out how to get it. And that's what I love about it. It is so simple.
So would they reach out to you through your website or?
www.thecobbstudio, only one B in Cobb.com.
Okay. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Or my email, which is Cara B. Graver @AOL.
And what if, can you recommend, like, if there was one book that somebody could pick up and read on their own, what would that be?
Okay, that would be the name of it. It's the original Marshall Rosenberg book. It's Nonviolent Communication, a language of life. And maybe even better than that, or alongside that, is go to YouTube and look up Marshall Rosenberg. And there are many different, or look up nonviolent communication. There are many different people doing it or teaching it, but there's also stuff that he's done. And it's just amazing to listen to him.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Nancy. Take care.